Hey guys, Fuma here today with the BCS tournament report update. So today we're on the Bushiroad official website because they have given us the tournament deck distribution. So for this particular event, we see that Forest and Dragoncraft are the two most popular decks, with Sword and Rune at 9%, Abyss at 14%, and then somehow Illumisme is still being played, and Idolmaster at 17%. So it is a little interesting that it was not Runecraft and Idolmaster the two most popular decks, because these are, in my opinion, the two strongest in the current meta. And I think this is reflected in terms of the final cut. So if we look at the core Idolmaster deck that came first, so this deck, it is sort of like I described in my tier list video, and it's a very standard build. So essentially, you curve out early, and if your opponent doesn't clear it, you buff your followers swing face. You have multiple tempo evos, so you can clear the opponent's board. And then basically from turn 3 onwards, if you have the evo point, or turn 4 onwards, you can start evolving Uzuki to basically tempo out and go swarming the board, and also storming the face, right? And then you also have cards like this one, so Yasuha Okazaki, she can search for a follower, keep basically extending the board, force your opponent to clear. And then after that, follow Naokamiya, and then this card can also swarm the board with 2 cards from the top of your deck. And then Fumiya also bring out 2 followers, and then basically, all of these cards can basically tutor storm followers, and then it's just a constant wave of aggression to the enemy face. This deck has a lot of very favorable matchups. Of course, it does have a few bad matchups into pure control, but overall, I think this is definitely one of the most solid decks and worth playing, even though this is only a 1-month format. So that's probably why it wasn't as popular, as you'd think. So the next deck is Amata's Forest. So Amata's Forest, again, it's one of those decks which, if you open well, you can basically run over anything, right? This build does seem a little interesting. So they are running the new Yumi Alba. So this card, I believe, is the Tempo Evo. So yeah, if you have, or you're not going to have 3 Passion Forward, that's for sure. But I think its Evo is very strong. Yeah, it's put a card with 3 defense or less and put it on the bottom of the opponent's deck. So this is almost like it's almost like a Priest of the Cudgel, right? So there's not functionally that much difference between putting something to the bottom of the deck and banishing it for real. So I can see why he runs this instead of Rose Garden, for instance. And so interestingly, he is running stuff like the Cassiopeia. We don't see this too often with Amataz, but I think this makes sense because in the current meta where you're playing against a lot of Cool, which is like an aggro deck, right? So Cassio lets you contest the board very strongly. Otherwise, you would just die, like when they play like Uzuki or their 5 cost whatever. But instead, if you have like an EX zone, you play this, you ping them for like 10 whatever, full clear, and now the Cool player has to clear the 4-5. And 4-5 is actually quite difficult to clear for Cool Idolmaster. So I actually think this is a pretty reasonable inclusion within the deck. And then 2 copies of Anastasia. So this is a new I guess you could almost call it the money card, right? The SP. I think 50 cards had a list of 30k. Now obviously it's not worth 30k, but yeah, the SP is probably more like a few $100s if we're being real. But regardless, this one you recover play points when you play it on the field, and then basically if it's the 3rd card you played, you recover 2 more play points, making it effectively a 1 play point card. And then once you play the 5th card, which is very easy to do with Amataz because all of your fairies cost 1 or your fairy wisp cost 0. So you can just play this, buff everything up +1/+1, and force your opponent to respond. And not necessarily every deck can do this, especially if you've prematurely buffed it with the, not prematurely, but, previously buffed it with the Blessed Fairy Dance or Amataz, or say even if you have the Elf Song, for instance, right, then a 3/3, that's practically impossible for a deck like Cool Idolmaster to clear. So I almost feel like this deck has been teched specifically to be Cool Idolmaster, and then obviously it maintains the favorable matchup against Kuon. So that would be my guess as to why this guy brought this particular deck. Okay, 3rd place, we've got Dimension Shift. So, I mean, we all expected D-Shift to be strong still. So let's see if it's running anything spicy. Not really, right? I mean, this is a pretty standard list. In fact, yeah, it's literally what you'd expect people to play. It's like the stock standard cookie cutter list. I like it. Not much to say. You've definitely seen this before if you've been playing for a while. Then finally, we've got Yokai Abyss. So Yokai Abyss, are they running the new Ranko card? They're not. Despite Ranko being brought down TCG player, it doesn't seem to be seen play. Okay, so just a very standard package. So You've got the silence engine here, so silence always good if you discard the right cards. Of course, Gensetsu. Gensetsu is one of those cards which has very strong matchups against specific decks, usually aggro. I mean, there's a lot of decks I just can't do anything if you drop Gensetsu and then you drop like 4 wards on them, right? While clearing their board. And then of course it's got the Ever Strong if you kind of pitch this with the Wings of Lust for the Israfil and you bring it back with Death Breath. So this is very much how would I say it? It is the Abyss deck that you would expect to see without any of the fancy tech and without any of the new Idolmaster cards, despite the fact that Idolmaster did give Control Abyss a lot of strong tools. So I think that's pretty much it. Going back to the stats, so it's interesting that Dragon had such a high percentage and then didn't make the top card. Or maybe it did actually. We only saw the top 4. But it's interesting that we did see representation from Rune, Cool, and then Abyss, and then Forest. So it's pretty widespread, I think. Okay. Well, that's pretty much it for this video. As always, and this graphic is a little bit old. I didn't have time to update it, unfortunately. But thanks as always to everyone who is part of the Patreon program. So I think Rockstar Siege of all time, Moby the King, Jarrell Fries, Framework, Misclick, Yami no Kami, Hung Yuan. Thank you as always for your support. Without you, it wouldn't be possible to keep the site running. So that's pretty much it. And we also have a bunch of exclusive content on the Patreon as always. And we also do coaching raffles if you're interested in that for the BCS season. That's pretty much it for me, and I will see you guys next time.